Water is one of the most abundant substances on Earth and regulates its temperature. Consider the fact that due to an absence of water to moderate its temperatures, over the course of a full lunar day and night, the temperature on the moon can vary wildly, from around positive 200 to minus 200 degrees Celsius, which corresponds to positive 392 to minus 328 degrees Fahrenheit. Your body also consists of over 50% water. If you become too dehydrated, you can die. Therefore, no one can argue the importance of water to life on Earth. Water is important to life on Earth for many reasons. As already mentioned, it is one of the most abundant substances on Earth, meaning that many creatures reside in the water. It's actually thought that life probably originated in the water from an evolutionary perspective, and all organisms, whether water-dwelling or land-dwelling, contain 60 to 90% water, depending on the portion of the organism you're looking at. Water also has many unique chemical properties that we will study in this chapter. One unique property of water is that the molecules interact with one another through hydrogen bonds, which causes them to stick together to form pools of water or water droplets. The sticky property is called cohesion. One example that you can visualize is you can actually fill a glass so water is slightly above the rim, as seen in the picture below. Cohesion amongst water molecules at the water surface produces what's called surface tension. This means that the water at the surface is resistant to being broken. Consider these examples. If you have ever belly flopped onto a pool, it probably hurt. That's because the entire surface area of your body was met by the resistance of the hydrogen bonds of the water molecules at the surface of the pool of water. Leaves can float on top of water, there are insects that can walk on water, and there's even a lizard called the basilisk lizard that can actually run across top of the water. To see how this takes place, watch the video link below. In this illustration of surface tension, you can see that the weight of the needle floating on the glass of water is pulling the surface downward, but at the same time, the surface tension is pulling it up, suspending it on the surface of the water and keeping it from sinking. Notice the indentation in the water around the needle. Water surface tension also allows this water strider insect to stay afloat. Another property of water is that it is an effective solvent, which means that it is capable of dissolving a wide range of substances, including proteins, salts, and sugars. Consider the fact that if you have ever put sugar in coffee or iced tea or lemonade, the sugar readily dissolves. A solute is dissolved in a solvent to yield what's called a solution. Water is able to dissolve ionic and polar covalent molecules, which are called hydrophilic molecules, literally translated as water-loving. You can remember the phrase like dissolves like, because water has polar covalent bonds itself and can also form ions, which we will learn later. Water is able to dissolve other substances that have properties similar to its own. What water cannot dissolve are uncharged nonpolar molecules such as fats and oils. These are referred to as hydrophobic molecules, literally translated as water-fearing. When table salt is mixed in water, spheres of hydration are formed around the ions. This is because the negatively charged chloride ions are attracted to the partially positively charged hydrogen ions due to the polar covalent bonds in water, while the positively charged sodium ions are attracted to the partially negatively charged oxygen atoms in the water. Have you ever heard the phrase that oil and water do not mix? This is actually true, as this macro image of oil and water shows. Oil does not dissolve in water but forms droplets instead. This is due to it being a nonpolar compound. Water resists temperature changes. It takes a lot of energy to heat it up, and it takes a long time to cool down. Water covers more than 50% of the Earth, which regulates its overall temperature. Consider this example. It's always warmer by Lake Michigan in the winter and cooler in the summer. This is due to the moderating properties of the water temperature. Water being resistant to temperature changes is also important to living organisms. Because organisms contain a lot of water, they also resist temperature changes themselves. Evaporation refers to liquid water molecules changing to gas. This is directly applicable to keeping organisms cool. For example, we sweat when we are hot. What happens in this case is the hottest water molecules on the skin's surface evaporate, meaning that they turn into a gas to take heat with them. When you put ice cubes in a drink, the ice floats. This means that solid water is actually less dense than liquid water. This is because when water freezes, the hydrogen bonds freeze at fixed distances from one another, pushing the water molecules further apart. This means the molecules are less tightly packed together, therefore they are less dense. This is weird. Typically, the definition of a solid is that it is more dense than a liquid, not the other way around. So this is yet another unique property of water. This, of course, is beneficial to all of the water-dwelling creatures on Earth that need to survive during cold winters. The layer of ice that floats on top of a body of water provides insulation to the creatures, and they can survive underneath the ice during the winter and are not forced up close to the surface of the water where the air temperature is colder. As seen here, hydrogen bonding makes ice less dense than liquid water. The lattice structure of ice makes it less dense than the freely flowing molecules of liquid water, enabling it to float on water. Another important property of water to life is that it is involved in most of the chemical reactions in a cell, such as photosynthesis and digestion. Examples include dehydration synthesis and hydrolysis discussed later. Within a water molecule, hydrogen and oxygen are held together by polar covalent bonds, but the atoms in those molecules can gain and lose electrons to form ions seen below. These include positive hydrogen ions and negative hydroxide ions. Water and both of these ions are equally stable, therefore water disassociates into these ions and reforms back into water molecules. Pure water, meaning water with nothing dissolved in it, contains equal concentrations of hydrogen and hydroxide ions. If water does have a substance dissolved in it, it can become either acidic or basic. Acidic means that the concentration of hydrogen ions is greater than the concentration of hydroxide ions. That means that an acid is a substance that releases hydrogen ions when dissolved in water to increase the acidity. An example of an acid is hydrochloric acid, which disassociates into hydrogen ions and chloride ions. A basic substance has more hydroxide ions than hydrogen ions. This means that a base is a substance that releases hydroxide ions when dissolved in water. An example of a base is sodium hydroxide, which disassociates in water into sodium ions and hydroxide ions. How acidic a substance is can be measured using the pH scale, which has values ranging from 0 to 14. A neutral solution, which is pure water with equal concentrations of hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions, has a pH of 7.0. Acids have a pH below 7.0, while bases have a pH above 7.0. Each unit on the pH scale represents a tenfold change in the concentration of hydrogen ions. For example, if the pH decreased from 7 to 6, this is more acidic, meaning that this substance would have a tenfold increase in the concentration of hydrogen ions. The pH scale measures the concentration of hydrogen ions in a solution. Take a look at the scale and see distilled water in the middle with a neutral pH of 7. The further away from 7 a pH reading is, the stronger the acid or the stronger the base. At the low end of the scale, you see substances like lemon juice and gastric acid in the stomach are strong acids. At the high end of the scale, you see substances such as soapy water and bleach are strong bases. A buffer is a substance that maintains a solution at a constant pH by accepting or releasing hydrogen ions in response to small changes in hydrogen ion concentration. If the acidity of a solution needs to be increased, the buffer will release hydrogen ions. If the acidity needs to be decreased, the buffer will combine with the hydrogen ions to take them out of solution. An example would be carbonic acid in our blood. Blood needs to maintain a relatively constant pH to maintain optimal conditions for all of our cells. This diagram shows the body's buffering of blood pH levels. The blue arrows going to the right show the process of raising pH as more carbon dioxide is made. The purple arrows going to the left indicate the reverse process, the lowering of pH as more bicarbonate is created. So carbonic acid has the ability to release hydrogen ions into solution to increase the acidity, but it also has the ability to accept hydrogen ions to decrease the acidity of a solution.